Alright, hey guys, back with a couple of videos. I'm going to be filming these back to back and then uploading them when I get home. Um, Pretty happy day for me as a sports fan. I am a New York Jets fan, and looks like we just got Le'Veon Bell, so that's good. Probably about a month after I'm done doing the baseball videos, I will start doing some football ones leading up to the NFL draft, which then I'll do draft analysis and start my rankings and stuff like that for fantasy football. So today we're going to dive into the Arizona Diamondbacks. They kind of have an identity issue as far as I'm concerned. They don't know whether they want to be a contender or a complete and total rebuild, which is kind of confusing for fantasy players because you don't really know which way they're going to go. Are they going to commit to their veterans, or are they going to shop them and then go with a lot of young players? As fantasy players, we would probably like to see them go with a full rebuild and then try and trade their good players to teams where they can put up better stats. But having said that, they do have some interesting pieces. And let's just dive right in, starting with their pitching staff. You have Zach Greinke, who is their number one pitcher. He's pretty much a plug-and-play guy. Pretty much all formats. I mean, I don't see him going past maybe the top 10, 15 pitchers in a redraft league. If you have him in keeper leagues, you're probably using a keeper on him. If you have him in dynasty leagues, he's going to probably be one of the anchors of your staff. He had good stats last year. He struck out more than a batter an inning. He pitched, he's a little bit under. He pitched 207 for innings, and he struck out 199 guys. That's close enough where I'm not going to, bitch too much about that. That's pretty much a batter an inning. That's good enough for me. I'll take that. And he had a 1.08 whip, which is elite, and a 3.21 ERA, which is pretty good. So he's still near the top of the starting pitching rankings. He's a guy that should be owned in all formats. Then you have Robbie Ray, who had a little bit of injury problem last year. He only threw 123 innings, but in that 123 innings, he struck out 169 guys. That's good. Remember when I talked about that K per 9? Striking out more than a batter an inning. That is well over a batter an inning. I'm sure if you average that out, you're looking at over 10 K per 9. So that's really, really good. You definitely want that kind of thing. If you see that, you're doing pretty good. His whip was a 1.35. I'd like to see that down a little bit, but like I said, he had a little bit of injury concern last year. So you can assume that probably will come back down to about a 1.2, 1.25 this year. His ERA was elevated a little bit last year. He had a 3.93, so it's still under 4, so he's keeping you in games most of the time. He's not getting a lot of the quality starts, though, that a guy like him should have. So he's a guy who you want to keep an eye on. If he's healthy, you want him in all formats. If he's showing signs of, getting banged up and spending some time on the DL, it definitely takes a hit on his fantasy value. Zach Godley is a name that is not going to jump off the charts. It's, oh my God, yes, I know him. I have to have him. But he's a really, really solid, steady pitcher. Again, 178 innings last year, 185 guys, striking out more than a batter an inning. A 1.33 whip, so really, really steady and solid. His ERA, though, is where you got to be concerned a little bit. It's a 4.74. That's concerning. That to me means he probably doesn't have a lot of movement on his fastball. So when he can blow it by people, he'll strike them out. But when he's not blowing it by people, they're probably hitting it really hard. Extra base hits, home runs, stuff like that. So he's a guy that if you can get him a little bit later in drafts, you might get a little bit of value off of him. But, you're not keeping him in a keeper league. He's not anchoring your staff in a dynasty league, and he's probably going to go off the board somewhere around the middle rounds in a redraft league. So then you have the kid I talked about a little while ago, Luke Weaver, who was a pretty decent prospect with the Cardinals a few years back. And in 2017, when he first got called up, he threw 60 innings. He struck out 72 guys. He had a whip of 1.26 and an ERA of 3.88. That was pretty solid, and everyone was looking at him last year as a breakout candidate. I actually traded for him in a couple of dynasty leagues at the end of 2017, hoping he would be a breakout in 2018, and he disappointed. He was very inconsistent. His strikeouts dipped under a strikeout per inning. He threw 136 innings last year and only struck out 121 guys. His whip went to 1.5, and his ERA went to 4.95. So definitely a disappointment. So he's a guy that is very interesting because you don't really know who he is. Is he the kid that came up in 2017, striking out more than a batter an inning, having a decent whip and an okay ERA? Or is he going to be like he was last year, where he essentially should have been non-rostered in pretty much every league? That's the question. So he could be a bounce-back candidate, or he could be very underwhelming again. So your mileage may vary on that. It really just depends on the makeup of your team, what you're looking for. If you're looking for a low-cost dart throw at the end of a draft, if he's out there, you could do a lot worse probably, but just be prepared to be cutting him quickly if he doesn't show improvement, and looking on your waiver wire to see who might be a surprise, who might be a call-up that no one saw coming, that could be performing well. So just be prepared to have a quick trigger on him. In the bullpen, the only name that really jumps out at me is Archie Bradley. I mean, Greg Holland is there, and he has closer experience, but he was an absolute dumpster fire last year, and relievers are very fickle, so when they lose it, it doesn't always come back right away, because there's a whole mental game with them that just is unlike just about any other position in sports. So you really want to take a close look at Greg Holland. I don't see him being rostered in too many redraft leagues. And he doesn't have a ton of value if he's not going to be at least a setup guy in Arizona. So look at the makeup of the team coming out of spring training. If he's a setup guy, then you can draft him in leagues that reward holds. But if he's a 6th inning guy, if he's a 7th inning guy, then he's pretty much unrosterable. Archie Bradley, like I said, he's pretty good. He's studly, and if he's going to be the main closer, he has great value, because again, like I've said 1,000 times on these videos, even teams that are only going to win 70 games a year, someone's got to close those games. So if they only win 70 games, he could still have 35 saves. So you definitely want to look at him if he's available in your leagues. He's a guy you would want to have. Moving on to the lineup. With the trade of Paul Goldschmidt, probably the best hitter in that lineup is Eduardo Escobar. He's a middle infielder. He plays a little bit of third every once in a while too, but the kid is an extra base machine. Last year he had over 70 extra base hits, combined between the Minnesota Twins and then when he was traded to Arizona. And if he can continue on that path, he hits over 20 home runs for the past couple of years. A lot of doubles, couple of triples. He's got a decent on-base percentage, probably around 333. He's got a lot of value in fantasy leagues because the kid just rakes. He's good. And again, I see him as being a trade candidate to a contender later in the season, where he can really put up some good stats if you put him in the middle of a better lineup. So he's definitely a guy that you want to have pretty much in all formats. So I would definitely, I don't know how high you're taking him in a redraft league, because there's going to be there's a lot sexier names at shortstop. But if you want to go for other names and then draft him in the middle rounds, it's not a bad play. You can get a lot of value from that. Jake Lamb, who's going to be moving from third base to first base this year to replace Paul Goldschmidt. He's got some value. He was injured last year. If he can bounce back and be what he was a couple of years ago, he's a good guy to have. He's got a lot of pop. He's got 30 home run potential. He gets on base at a decent clip, so he's a name that you want to look for. A lot of people might forget about him because, like I said, Arizona's not a very sexy team, so you want to look for that for value, maybe in the middle rounds of a draft. After that, it really falls off, though. Ketel Marte, we've been waiting for him to break out for a couple of years. He hasn't done it yet. He's got a little bit of pop. He steals some bases, but he just can't put a whole season together. Steven Souza Jr. in the outfield. Again, he's got pop, but the average usually isn't there. The on-base percentage usually isn't there. If you're looking for a cheap source of home runs late in a draft, he's probably a decent option. But in most formats, he's probably going to be on people's bench or on the waiver wire. Adam Jones just signed the other day with them. I think it was a one-year deal for $3 million or something around that. He's fallen off a lot from his days with the Orioles, and he's a center fielder who's over 30, and the legs go, and the arm goes a little bit, and he was never a ridiculously great hitter to begin with. He was always steady, like around 280, 15 to 20 home runs, stuff like that. But right now, he's probably not that rosterable. Two intriguing names in their lineup. One of them is Carson Kelly. He came over in the trade for Paul Goldschmidt from St. Louis. He was a very highly regarded prospect. He was their top catching prospect for a couple of years. But with St. Louis, you have Yadi Molina, and with the emergence of Andrew Knizner, who I talked about in the Cardinals video, really emerging as their top hitting catching prospect, it made Carson Kelly expendable. Me, if I was Arizona, if I was trading Goldschmidt, I personally would have not made the deal unless they included Knizner. I would have insisted on him, but that's just me. I think he's a much better prospect than Carson Kelly. He's a coin flip. I mean, he's had a couple of cups of coffee with St. Louis and showed absolutely nothing. He didn't hit. He didn't have any power. So it really is just, he's a wait-and-see guy. I would leave him on the waiver wire for now, unless you own him as a prospect and he's on your roster already. If you're in a keeper or a dynasty league. In a redraft league, if you're in a one-catcher league, he's probably not even going to be on a roster. If you're in a two-catcher league, he's probably going to be on someone's bench, because I think he's going to be at the bottom of the 30 catchers in baseball. You could probably draft someone's backup, who's going to catch maybe 1 or 2 days a week and maybe get better stats than what Kelly's going to put up over a whole year. They also have Alex Avila, so he may even split time. They got John Paul Murphy. So they got other catchers who can take at-bats from him. So until he shows he can hit, he may not even be the full-time catcher. So I would definitely avoid him in drafts. The other intriguing name, and everyone's going to be like, oh, you're a Met fan, so of course you're going to talk about him, is Wilmer Flores, who signed with the Diamondbacks on a free agent deal. Wilmer's very intriguing. I always liked Wilmer as a Met, one, because he's insanely clutch. He had more walk-off hits. I think he was tied with David Wright for the amount of walk-off hits with the Mets, or he might have overtaken him last year and had the most walk-off hits in the history of the Mets. So the kid's insanely clutch. He was injured last year, so his numbers were down, but when he's healthy, he kills right-handed hitting. Absolutely destroy left-handed pitching. I'm sorry. He destroys left-handed pitching. So, if he's healthy, he's a really, really intriguing guy to have. He was a utility guy for the Mets, so he might have dual eligibility. He might have like triple eligibility, because he could have second base, first base, and third base eligibility, along with corner infield and middle infield for those leagues that use those formats and positions. So he can be very versatile for you. So he's a guy that I would look at late in the draft for, some really big value. He's got some decent pop. He's gonna hit 15 if they give him 350 at bats. He's gonna hit 12 to 15 home runs. So, and if they let him start every day, it's something that Met fans, we always scratched our head about for years, saying, why don't they just give the kid a chance to start every day and see what can happen. I think he has the upside of like a Daniel Murphy light. He could hit not like he's never going to hit 300, but he can hit 280. He can have an on-base percentage of about 330, 340. And he has an upside of 20 to 25 home runs. So, I mean, if they give him an everyday job and he shows he can take advantage of it, he could really provide some great value. I actually took him in the late rounds of one of my drafts as like a dart throw just to see, and we'll see what happens. As far as the Diamondbacks prospects, I'm sorry if I sound a little weird. I have a little bit of a head cold, so as you can tell. They have a couple of intriguing prospects. They have a couple of pitching prospects. One is John Duplantier. He's the number 80 prospect in baseball. Last year he pitched 74 innings and struck out 77 guys. He has almost a 3-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio. He struck out, it was 68-28. So, I mean, I'd like to see that a little bit higher. I'd like to see either a little more strikeouts or a little less walks, but it's not bad. But he's a guy definitely to keep an eye on. The one I like, and I like a lot better, excuse me, very long night last night because I couldn't sleep because of this head cold, is Taylor Widener. He's the number 97 prospect in baseball. However, he pitched 137 innings last year and struck out 176 guys. That's like an 11.5 K per 9. That jumps off the page to me. That, to me, is a big, big number. And one of the reasons why I'm going to be posting this video later today is I'm actually doing a prospect draft right now as we speak. And I know a couple of the guys that I play with in our league may be watching these videos. So I don't want them to know that I'm hot on this kid, because I'm going to look and see if he's available the minute I'm done recording this, and I'm putting him in my queue. So this video is I'm probably going to put, the next video I'm doing is of the Colorado Rockies. I'm probably going to post that video first and then post this video, simply because I want to wait a little bit and see if I can grab him in my prospect draft before anyone sees how hot I am on him. Plus, with the 176 strikeouts, he only walked 43 batters, so he's got a 4-to-1 K to walk ratio. So the kid strikes out a lot of guys and he doesn't walk a lot of guys. So he's got a ton of potential. I really like this kid. I really think he could be a part of their rotation, especially if they trade a couple of guys like Greinke, maybe Robbie Ray, if it looks like they're going to fall off the face of the earth this year again. They could definitely move a couple of those guys, and I could see him getting a call up, and we can see what he does in the major leagues. As far as position players, they have a shortstop, Jazz Chisholm. Last year, he hit 25 home runs, he stole 17 bags, and he had a 369 on-base percentage. So that's really solid. I could definitely see him getting a call up in the next year or two, so he's a guy that should be on your prospect radar. Definitely is a look for middle infield. A lot of times shortstops, depending on their defense, they can get moved to second base. Sometimes they'll get moved to third base. He's got the power profile that would play at third base. So it really just depends on what they have in their system for those positions and where he's going to fit the best. So just keep an eye on that. They also have Pavin Smith, who is not ranked in the top 100, but he is the number 6 first base prospect in baseball. Last year he hit 11 home runs and had a 343 on base percentage. He's not that big of a prospect to me. I think there's just a lack of quality first base prospects in baseball right now, because a lot of them are getting moved to other positions. There's quite a few first base prospects out there who were drafted in the past couple of years who were dual players, which means they both they pitch and they hit. And a couple of them, like Shohei Ohtani, there's a kid for the Tampa Bay Rays whose name slips me right now. They actually took him out of consideration of playing first base, and they're making him just like Ohtani. They're going to make him a pitcher and a DH. So I think there's just a little bit of a lack in quality first base prospects right now in baseball, and I think that's the reason why he's so high. Because with only a 343 on base percentage and only 11 home runs, he's not a guy who's on my prospect radar at all. So I would definitely, your mileage may vary on a kid like that. You know, he could be a dart throw prospect. All of a sudden, he could explode this year and hit 25 home runs. We don't know. That could be why he's so high. Maybe the prospects who are actually watching him play are seeing something different than I'm seeing just by looking at his numbers. So, but as of right now, he's not on a prospect radar for me. But I felt the need to mention him just because he's rated the number 6 prospect in baseball at the position. So, and then the last guy I'm going to talk about is Dalton Varsho. He's a catching prospect. He's actually a really good catching prospect. Last year he had 12 home runs, but he hit 294 and has a 367 on base percentage. And anytime you can get that kind of production out of a catcher, that's going to be good. And if he grows into his power a little bit more, if he can bump that 12 up to about 20, if he can get 20 home runs in the major leagues and hit and get on base for that kind of level, he'll be an all-star. He'll be a perennial all-star. So he's definitely a guy that should be on your prospect radar. I own him in a couple of leagues, actually. So he's a guy I'm pretty high on, and I'm hoping he gets a call-up either late this year or next year. Because in the leagues that I own him in, it's a couple of the ones that I'm rebuilding, and I could use his production if he can put up those kind of numbers in the major leagues. So that's pretty much it on Arizona. As always, like, share, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff for me. And I am going to stop this video, grab a little more water so I can get my voice back a little bit, and then we're going to dive into the Colorado Rockies. So we'll be back, even though I'm going to probably, like I said, post this video second because I want to keep that kid Widener in my pocket. So we'll be back in a little bit.